As most of you know, my favorite video game series is The Legend of Zelda, and in that, my favorite game is the Ocarina of Time. I absolutely love these games. The epic journey they take you on is unforgettable. Even in their weakest moments, these games still create a better experience than most. When I have time on my hands, grinding through one of these games is one of the best uses of it. So I will be honest, it was disappointing when an entire Nintendo system went its lifespan without a Zelda game. The Wii U had many flaws, and one of them was its flagship Zelda game kept getting delayed. When it did finally come out on the Wii U, it was more known as a Switch game now, as it was delayed so much it came out on Nintendo's next console. It was kind of like what happened to Twilight Princess. And as expected, Breath of the Wild helped launch Switch to be the epic game system it is today and helped Nintendo get back on track. And I absolutely love Breath of the Wild. I still play it and still make videos on this channel about it. To date, I gotta have around 20 videos for Breath of the Wild. And the people did as well. It took home game of the year in 2017, and deservingly so. Remember the first weekend I got, I played the hell out of it. I had like 20 hours logged, more than I had really in any other game I've ever played. Basically isolated myself from the entire world, kinda in preparation for 2020 it appears. And by the end of that first weekend I had gone to my first Divine Beast, which was Vamedo. And enough rambling about how I really love Breath of the Wild. It's time to get to the main point of this video. And as the title says, it's about Zelda Dungeons. Now, being the first Divine Beast I played, I absolutely loved it. Currently, I think I had it ranked 3 out of 4, but I enjoyed playing through it a ton the first time around. But I noticed one thing, the concept seemed a bit repetitive, where you basically take your Sheikah Slate and go just a bunch of points on the entire beast, and then eventually fight a Blight Ganon. Then I noticed this same premise happened in Ruda, Naboris, and Rudania. By Rudania, the last one I did, I was scratching my head as wondering why the hell it was so repetitive. And I was pretty disappointed by its repetitiveness, to be honest. It was also one of the lone things I was disappointed about in this game. Another was the fact that there was a total of 4 dungeons. We hadn't seen that few since Majora's Mask, all the way back in the year 2000. Now it's time to get to the main point of the video, the title of the video. Breath of the Wild 2 needs better dungeons. Breath of the Wild really changed it up from a bunch of normal Zelda practices. But the key in all these other games usually revolved around amazing dungeons. And you think of some of the best levels in all the video games? Zelda dungeons are basically cat poop and a kitty litter. It's littered all over the place on the list. So how could these dungeons improve? Well, here's a great example. Let's go to Ocarina of Time. I said it was my favorite game. And we're going to start with the Water Temple. An underwater shrine designed for you to become the most proficient swimmer there has ever been by constantly varying the water level and constantly switching your damn boots. After that, you go to the Shadow Temple, which is a winding path underneath the graveyard, just leading you deeper into the darkness the game can possibly produce, being E-rated. Yes, that does not make sense for E-rated. All while you need the all-seeing eye to make it safely through. And you conclude with the Spirit Temple, a sacred monument in the middle of a very vast desert, relying on every single power-ups, every single item you've gone through the game to successfully conquer this monument. And that right there, that's a stretch of 3 dungeons that might take you about 3 hours to beat. Their themes are extremely varied and it's extremely diverse. The Divine Beasts are not exactly that. They are very futuristic tech war machines that is taken over by Ganon. They very much run the same. And that's one of the main things they can focus on. The dungeons in Breath of the Wild feel like the same thing. When almost any other Zelda game, they completely vary on the theme. Think about you go from the Snowhead Temple to the Great Bay Temple. You go from the Earth Temple to the Wind Temple. The Temple of Time to the City in the Sky. Zelda dungeons need to be diverse. That helps create the flow of the game to be as unique and fresh as it truly deserves to be. The game also needs more dungeons. I think I mentioned before, there is only 4 dungeons in this game. I can honestly blow up one of my fingers, be like JPP, and I could still count the amount of dungeons in this game. Now I get it, you can count Hyrule Castle, you can count that as a dungeon. They also had a DLC dungeon, although you do have to pay bonus money for that. And I'm also aware the game has a bunch of mini dungeons in the shrines. But those don't still count as the true dungeons that we see in Zelda games. Those 4 dungeons ties Majora's Mask. While being a fairly rushed project to get it out onto the Nintendo 64, still managed to have 4 amazing dungeons. And speaking of those, how about just highlight the Stone Tower Temple real quick. Arguably the most epic of all the dungeons in the Zelda series. Many people have it ranked number 1, and deservingly so. Hell, think of Ocarina of Time, again my favorite game. When you're an adult, there is 5 main dungeons you go to. I'm not even including Ganon's castle on this, and here's a map of the Breath of the Wild. It's fucking huge! And they can only find a space to put 4 dungeons here? Sure, the game did try to set up where you can choose your own adventure. But damn, there could be so many more epic levels, so many more epic dungeons in this land of Hyrule. 4 beasts ain't gonna cut it. And like many Zelda fans, or just hell, video game fans in general, they understand these dungeons are pretty revolutionary. Think of Eagle's Tower here from Link's Awakening, a game that came out in 1993. Yeah, this dungeon, you literally take down an entire floor in it. That was the entire theme of that dungeon, which was pretty insane to pull off. Ocarina of Time had one that was very famous, and now it's become infamous, that everyone learned how to change the water level and play Zelda Lullaby way too much. But the gimmick was pretty neat in how you had to change the water level to accomplish the task you're currently on. And again, one of the reasons why the Stone Tower Temple might be number one is you have to flip the entire dungeon to continue exploring it, and then you do it even more when you're in said dungeon. That whole concept's just insane. And I'm not gonna be daft, I'm aware Breath of the Wild did have some gimmicks to their dungeon. You can rotate each one of the beasts in some ways. But that said though, rotating a bird so you can fly easier, the camel's hump to change one room, or the elephant's trunk, it's not exactly the same thing. So these gimmicks in the Breath of the Wild dungeons, are they as epic as all the other Zelda dungeons? No. Could they easily be as epic? Yeah, they could. So there it is, this is how I think the Breath of the Wild 2 dungeons could be better. And don't get me wrong, I said at the beginning, Breath of the Wild is still an amazing game. And the Divine Beasts were still really fun to play through. But for Zelda games, they set the bar so goddamn high, that if the dungeon is not epic, it's not enough. With Breath of the Wild 2 in the works, let's hope they can have those epic dungeons again.